Hello and welcome to Mike's Mets podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pashota, and a happy it's actually Friday to you. I started recording this Thursday night. I'm finishing this on Friday. I was watching the Knicks play last night and watching the Knicks blow out the Celtics after a game where the Mets absolutely beat the living hell out of the Atlanta Braves. And I'm like, it's a good thing to be a New York sports fan right now, like just for this day at least, where you have your local team absolutely beats the living hell out of your divisional rival. It feels great. It feels absolutely fantastic. You feel like you can conquer the world. And then the next day starts, and you're like, actually, can they actually take this momentum into a series against the Kansas City Royals, who they have to play over the next 3 games? So it's an important step for the Mets to take. We obviously the Knicks are going to the playoffs. Do the Mets have a playoff run in them? Most likely not, but we are now 2 weeks into the season, and we can take a look at what's gone on. Well, first of all, we've had more rainouts than games played, it feels like, at certain points. There's been quite a few rain delays after a very wet start of the season, and we are feeling more and more like we're starting to get a kind of a gauge for this team. The 16-4 blowout, we're probably not going to see too often. If there's one thing I know for sure is that Atlanta is an absolute hitter's park. Everything gets launched out of there. It is a launching pad for real. Just look at the Braves and look at how many home runs they hit. So whenever the Mets go down to Atlanta, I'm expecting them to actually play like these are going to be like high scoring games because the Mets can actually swing a bat. Like they can hit for power, and I'm expecting a lot of runs to be scored here. So I don't know if I was expecting a 16-4 blowout, but I was expecting it to be high scoring. That being said, it was an incredible game early on. The Braves. There's certainly questions about their starting pitching. The pitcher that they chose to throw in there, Winans, was completely unprepared and immediately got kicked in the teeth, which was pretty satisfying to watch. The Mets took early advantage in this game, and there was really no doubt as to how it was going to end, just because the Mets got off to a 7-0 lead through the first 4 innings, and honestly, I was kind of expecting them to cough it up, particularly when Atlanta scored 3 in the bottom of the fifth. But they just kind of kept the pedal on the gas and just made sure that Atlanta never really threatened in this game. And this was like a lot of base hits, 26 base hits in total, 16 for the Mets, 10 for the Braves. So there was definitely a lot of like just people just getting ripped hard. I didn't think Quintana pitched particularly great. But he was certainly fine for it. He at least got into the 6th inning, which I was happy about. And then it led to what has been the Mets' MVP so far this season, their bullpen. The Mets, 2 weeks into the season, are first in the National League in ERA. And I had to look at that like 4 times and be like, how is that possible? How are they first in the NL in the ERA? But it's true. They have been actually very economical in terms of their pitching staff being able to get away with quite a bit. Severino bounced back in that second star, which was a enormous part of it. So they're looking to see if maybe that first game against Milwaukee was more of an outlier, and hopefully he can kind of stick on the right road here going forward. But Quintana's been solid, as is Severino, as is Adrian Hauser. Hauser is the highest ERA of the group, 5.4. But honestly, I think it's just more the fact that he hasn't really had that many opportunities to pitch thus far. But early on, the star of that pitching staff has been Sean Manaea, and through 2 games, he has a 0.82 ERA, 14 strikeouts against 4 walks and 11 innings pitched. He has looked like a revelation early on the season. Can we say for sure if it was the beard and the hair holding him back? I'm not sure, but it does seem like clean shaven Manaea pitching a lot better than caveman Manaea. So we'll see if that has any bearing on it. But the bullpen has been obviously the biggest factor in the Mets' wins whenever they've had them, 5-7 to start the year off. So you have to look at the guys who have succeeded, and the 2 guys that are surprisingly among the 3 most key relievers in that Met bullpen this far have been Reed Garrett, who keeps coming in for like mop up duty and keeps holding everybody. Like nobody seems to be able to figure out Reed Garrett early on this year. He has 9 Ks and 5 1/3 innings against 2 walks. Reed Garrett was, for context, absolutely terrible in 2023, and he has been critical in 2024 for the Mets. Another surprising success has been Drew Smith. Drew Smith is arguably the most, the key cog right now. It's really weird to say. And he came in for Quintana and in the 6th inning and pitched an inning and 2/3 of scoreless baseball. No walks, 2 Ks. I mean, no hits. He's two perfect an inning and 2/3 perfect performance from Drew Smith against what is on paper considered the best offense in baseball. It's got to be considered like it's them and LA and the Dodgers and the Padres, and you're looking at it, you're like, wow, this is really impressive. Like that they were able to shut them down. Uh, it was not a good series for the Braves. The blowout in Game 3 and then Game 1 also getting kind of kicked in the teeth in that game as well. So you're looking at it, you're like, what exactly is going on with Atlanta? And if you're thinking like Atlanta's 7-4. And if you've had the thought, which I certainly did, that Atlanta maybe doesn't have it this year, maybe this is the year that it all kind of like swings back. The pendulum has to swing back on them. They started off last year 7-4 as well, so if you're thinking like, oh man, like they don't look as good as they did last year, it was exactly the same as last year. They were also 7-4 at the start of the year, and I think after they were started the year 7-4, they ran off like 7 straight after this point. So. Their first initial games have never really been very good for Atlanta. So they ended up winning 104 last year. Fun fact. So I don't think we can say for sure that Atlanta does not look like an elite group thus far. They've gotten off to a bad start, and the Mets certainly know about bad starts because we're still going through the horrific beginning of the year for Francisco Lindor, who has. If there's one thing to say, he doesn't strike out that much. I think that's really been the most important thing, is that he's not striking out a lot. So it's really just a matter of he's just not making good contact and kind of getting a little bit of bad luck. But 0.98, not the way you want to start off for your first 2 weeks of the season. And helpfully, he has not been the worst part of it. I think the most surprising thing is that Brett Beatty's leading this team in batting average right now. He is batting .311 with 1 home run, 6 RBIs. The 732 OPS obviously is because he's not really getting on base and he's not really hitting for much power. But it's got to be said, like he keeps coming up with some timely base hits, and he's going like a consistent 1 for 3 or 1 for 4 every day. So I applaud Brett Beatty for being off to a good start. Hopefully he can carry that in. Brandon Nimmo had a heck of a time in Atlanta. 2 home runs. He now leads the team with 10 RBIs. And he has been swinging quite the bat thus far. So we're looking to see if Nimmo can keep that up. He has been, I think, probably considered, you could probably catch him as the most important offensive player on the team right now. With certainly Francisco Alvarez has to be considered in that factor, in that regard as well. So the early on, it's been the Nimmo, Alvarez, and Beatty show. Lindor and Alonso have gotten off to slow starts. Alonso is striking out a lot. He does lead the team with 3 home runs, 6 RBIs. It was an important game also for DJ Stewart. A series actually for DJ Stewart, who was 0 for the season going into that, and I was like, oh wow, that's pretty bad. He was not getting as many opportunities. He was splitting a lot of time at DH, and going into the series, again, it's a launching pad. You put a guy like Stewart, who does have legitimate power, in Atlanta, you're going to see him come away with it. He popped a pair of home runs. They are his only base hits of the season. He has 2 hits. Both of them are home runs. He is batting 105 on the year. But because of the fact that he has 2 hits and 2 home runs, he has a 791 OPS. Early seasons are fun. So, and then, of course, the big shot last night was from Tyrone Taylor. And Tyrone coming away with the grand slam that kind of put the capper on the nights for the New York Mets. I'm saying night. It was really more of a late afternoon. But Taylor has been, I think, another very pleasant surprise for the Mets. He's batting .300 early on this season with of course the grand slam. But that grand slam burned him up to 7 RBIs in the season, puts him at second on the team. Uh, he's looked good. I've been very pleasantly surprised with that. So the Mets offense is not really breaking any records here, but they've been better than bad, but not good is the way to really describe it right now. And that's really just like I like Lindor's not going to bat under 100 the entire season. He will get it together. We know he is a slow starter. I don't think he's ever been this slow ever in his career. I gotta check the numbers on that, but I'm pretty sure this is the worst start of his career. So there is that. But Lindor at some point will come around, and this will be a distant memory of the fact that Steve Cohen, the Mets owner, had to say, "Why don't we applaud him, even though he's not doing well?" And like, that was nice. I appreciate Cohen coming away with that little bit of thing. Don't boo the guy like just because he got off to a bad start. He was the best player on the team by far last season. Don't get on the guy for not playing well early on. He's not the reason why they were struggling. Although you do want your guy who's making $300 million to be playing a little bit better than he has been. Uh, the Mets are 5-7. They're going into a series against Kansas City. Kansas City's been surprisingly good this season. We have to look at them as this being actually, I think, probably Kansas City favored in this one, just because of the fact that Kansas City's 9-4 in the year. Mets are 5-7, and Kansas City's pitching staff has been ridiculously good. The Mets' pitching staff has been surprisingly good as well. We could be looking at a lot of pitchers' duels. Kansas City's offense a lot better than the Mets, so they are going to have to work hard at kind of keeping guys like Bobby Witt Jr. off the get from going into any kind of major opportunities here. I think this is going to be a series where the Mets could go 2-3 if they play their cards right. So the pitching matchups that we're going to have for today are going to be former Met Michael Wacha going up against Luis Severino, and that will be interesting. Wacha's off to a good start of the season. Severino, as I mentioned before, came off the really horrendous first start against the Brewers and then really bounced back in the second start. So Severino pitching at home again. We're hoping a little bit better results this season. Game starts tonight at 7:10 p.m. Carlos Mendoza, as the Mets manager, I just want to put in this one final thing. Mendoza is, let's say, having some early season struggles. I don't want to deride a rookie manager who is never managed at the major league level before. This is something where we have to kind of grade him on a curve. He has made some kind of questionable decisions, particularly the early pulling of pitchers, but I think it's just Mendoza's philosophy that he wants to save his guys early on. The Mets haven't really had that much of a problem, it seems like, with the early pulls, and as I said, the Mets bullpen has actually stepped up majorly in these games. Something to watch. I do kind of question why exactly Mendoza's doing some certain things. There's some certain bullpen deployments that kind of made me wish for Buck Showalter again. And it's at some point we're going to have to come to our realization of, Mendoza was not anybody's first choice. I think he was the fifth, if I recall correctly. He the Mets were pretty set on either Counsell or anyone else really stepping in. So I don't know if Mendoza, how high he was on the pecking chart as to where the Mets were going to go with him as the Mets manager. I can say early on, I think he has treated the team well. He looks like, in terms of temperament and mentality, he seems to be good. He did get thrown out very early on and got a suspension, so there is that. But I applaud that he stood up for his team. Although I've never really been a fan of the fact that the manager's getting thrown out. I've always looked at it as really does nothing for your team. But if from a psychological point it feels like your manager is sticking up for you, I think that's great. I've never really thought of it that way, but that's just me. What I do like from Mendoza as far as that he does appear to be very upbeat and there's a lot of energy with him. Even after a 5-7 start, he's just been pretty it's early. We know where we are going to be later on. And he seems to be very appreciative of how good his team has come up for him, particularly after this series in Atlanta. This was a series where the Mets were not favored. Obviously, they were going to be on the road in Atlanta against the team that was once again going to be one of the heavy favorites this year. Uh, it's a situation where you could probably be looked at as like, oh, they're going to get swept here. This is a likely swept, and I think I think I wrote it off as a likely sweep early on when I was looking at the schedule. But the fact that they came away with 2 of 3 again against Atlanta, the fact that they're still kind of like wedged in the middle of the NL East thus far after a 5-7 start, it's encouraging. It's helped that the Marlins and Nationals are not good, and the Phillies have gotten off to not so great a start either. So that's where they're kind of positioning for. I think third place is probably the best option for the Mets. There's unlikely to be any kind of major heroics, and we're still waiting on JD Martinez coming back at some point, and Martinez is now being kind of looked at as like, oh, well, was this guy like damaged goods when they first signed him? I don't think so. I think he has the bad back traditionally. Mendoza had mentioned that he had the bad back last year, and look how good a season he had. So I wouldn't read too much into it, other than the fact that they do really need him back just to kind of spark that offense a little bit more. And I think having Martinez thrown into the middle of that lineup behind, let's say, Alonso and Lindor, will lead to a lot better opportunities for the Mets. So I'm looking forward to that eventually. But it was a great series win. As I mentioned before, I love seeing Atlanta get absolutely demolished. It doesn't happen that often. So when it does happen, and it's being happened by the Mets, I look for it a little bit more, and it feels even that much better. So, great series win for the Mets. Great blowout win yesterday by the Mets over the Braves. I'm looking for more and more that they can come through in these big moments, and in a big series win that really that's the defining moment for the Mets early on this season.
Thank you for listening to the Mike Spence podcast. Please be sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Finally, please also follow the podcast Twitter, which is Mike Spence Pod, all one word. Appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Let's go, Mets.